The fuse is lit on what is an annual debt ceiling debate. The commercial real estate bubble is beginning to show some very troubling signs, becoming more obvious that we covered several months ago on the channel. Russia is digging in, even as Ukrainian forces position troops behind enemy lines and strike mere kilometers from the Russian border. China is losing its ability to remain neutral as its diplomats speak out of turn and anger Europe. All that and more, plus another great giveaway that you can enter for free. All of this in the edition of news that you need to know this week. So let's jump in. Debt ceiling. It may be politics as usual in America from both sides of the political spectrum as a debt ceiling looms and neither side of the political spectrum is really willing to bend, agree, or make any concessions to the other. Now we're here again just 6 weeks or less before a full stop on the United States economy, and both parties are really digging in for a fight. But will we have a fight or merely a few grumbles and a whimper? If Congress doesn't approve the limit on how much the Treasury can borrow, the so-called debt ceiling, the federal government will not have enough money to pay all of its obligations by as early as June. Now, such a breakdown at this time could spark a more significant global financial panic and further erode confidence in the dollar. As we frequently point out in other videos, the push for many countries to transact in currencies other than the dollar will become stronger if America begins defaulting on its debt obligations or has its credit rating slashed that actually occurred a decade ago because of the debt ceiling annual debate. Now, House Speaker Kevin McCarthy has released a plan that his caucus broadly backed on Wednesday, and the GOP proposal would slash the federal budget back to levels adopted in the 2022 fiscal year, which would amount to $130 billion in spending cuts for 2024. Now, the bill has some vague elements as it leaves the task to lawmakers on congressional appropriation committees who craft spending bills that keep the government running and stave off a shutdown. Now, despite its vagueness in some categories, there are some discernible points of the plan, like requiring Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program or SNAP recipients to work 80 hours per month in employment or community service or risk losing their nutritional assistance benefits. Another point of the plan would block the cancellation of student debt. And yet another point of the plan would claw back the $80 billion that's set aside to improve the IRS and keep it functioning enough to offset typical attrition rates over the next decade. Now, there are also proposals in the bill that would repeal non-fossil fuel-based incentives and take back unspent COVID aid dollars. Now, while there's probably room for compromise between the two sides, is compromise possible, or does it remain a dirty word in Washington? If I was a betting man, I wouldn't bet on compromise on either side of the aisle. Many GOP lawmakers appear prepared to allow the nation to default without accepting major spending cuts and policy changes. And the House Speaker and the GOP need at least some reforms from the administration to demonstrate that they are still strong and united enough. Now, one of the major challenges for McCarthy will be whether he can keep his party together. His nomination to the speakership was challenging to say the least, and the White House has already indicated it would be willing to meet with any congressional leaders, not just McCarthy, to have a separate conversation about the budget. Now, the Biden administration doesn't believe that the GOP has a popular mandate. It thinks it does, since Republicans failed to retake the Senate and only captured a House by a handful of seats. The administration also doesn't want to appear as if they're rewarding the GOP for what it perceives as Republicans holding the U.S. economy hostage. Now, this debate always comes down to who is left holding the bag. Regardless of which side of the issue you personally fall on with this issue, politics in America is driven less by working together for the common good of the population and more on making the other side look weak. Whichever side can convince the populace the other side is responsible for a shutdown or a possible shutdown ends up holding all the cards. Eventually, the party that is left appearing to show unnecessary and harmful brinkmanship with the delicate U.S. economy is a party that is forced to acquiesce. Now, both sides are at the digging in phase, assessing and consolidating their forces and making early attempts at swaying and coalescing public opinion. The showdown may be inevitable, dramatically impacting your financial future. And I think that's the key takeaway here. If neither side bends on the issue, and again, this is not a statement indicating which side is right or wrong, but rather pointing to what's playing out, which is a game of chicken. The loser will be the American economy if this issue is not resolved. Now, both sides may welcome negotiations on government spending, which may resolve this crisis. Americans are increasingly more vocal about the fact that they don't believe business as usual is sustainable. Still, Polls show that they are against finding those cuts with programs in the social safety net. If no cap is implemented, the U.S. will only continue to pile on more debt. And that is equally problematic and increasingly more difficult to justify to the American people each time. Now, both sides could emerge with what they could spin as sort of a win. If we all collectively get too close to the debt ceiling drop dead date, the U.S. can't pay its bills. And as a result, financial markets will react negatively. The cost of doing businesses with other countries will increase, and government workers at both the federal and state levels may find themselves downsized or even furloughed. What has prevented the most extreme aspects of this in the past has been mega donor business leaders that usually step in and demand that we don't get to that point. After all, such a climate dramatically reduces their ability to do business and make a profit. A downgrading of the U.S. economy will result in a permanent increase in U.S. borrowing costs, and that will cripple U.S. business abroad in the long term. Now, the Biden administration is stating that they're confident that pressure from big business leaders will prevent too great of a backslide, but putting your faith in big business leaders to save today may be placing too much confidence in their abilities to steer ever increasingly divisive political factions. Corporate America doesn't really have as much clout with the GOP as it did during the Obama administration. So the levers that have been in place to be pulled in the past to fix these issues don't really appear to be with us in the present. And we may get a glimmer of how bad this might be this week, as early as Wednesday, when the House votes on the Speaker's Limit, Save, Grow Act. It isn't a guarantee that the Speaker has the 218 votes locked up for his debt limit bill. Just 5 Republicans, no votes, who feel the bill doesn't go far enough, or moderates who think the bill could launch a perilous conflict amidst a recession with the United States economy as a victim, and the bill would fail. Now, failure to pass a law with Democrats could spark a global economic meltdown. Making the necessary compromises could put McCarthy's job in the crosshairs again. After Wednesday's vote, Wall Street will either brace for a massive showdown or it's going to show confidence in the market. And Wall Street investors finance the country's enormous debt by buying the securities that Treasury sells to fund the government. And if they shy away from the market, interest rates could skyrocket, squeezing the government, businesses, and consumers. And right now, bankers and investors are sitting on their hands and waiting for the outcome of the vote on the bill. Though Biden needs a win as the country slides into a recession, McCarthy may be the one with the most at stake right now. McCarthy had to agree to a Freedom Caucus demand that deep spending cuts be tied to any hike in the debt ceiling. He also agreed to another crucial demand that reinstates a House rule in which a single lawmaker can force a vote to oust the sitting speaker at any time. And right now, any member of the House can make a motion to vacate with just one member. Currently, the GOP has a narrow 4-seat majority. In all likelihood, the House bill will get enough GOP support to kick it up to the Democratic-led Senate as everyone tries to set everyone else up for the blame and ultimately the responsibility for shutting the government down. Now, the best advice I could give you would be to brace for a long battle and more political brinkmanship over the economy all throughout the summer. We know we are entering a recession, so prep your finances like any other preps. We can never truly know if this recession will slide into a deeper depression, and we don't know how impactful other factors like the war or banking crisis might come into play. What do you think? Are we heading to another once-in-a-decade fight over the debt limit that will derail the U.S. economy for good this time? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Commercial bubble. One of the unknown blows to the economy that may be about to surface is the commercial real estate bubble bursting. More media outlets are increasingly warning about the downward spiral that's really playing out at this time in the commercial real estate market. We warned about the indicators that were emerging on this channel last year, and many of our predictions then may be coming to pass in the coming next few months. Now, while commercial real estate has experienced its share of bust in recent decades, this future downturn definitely has more dry powder to it. Landlords are contending with changes in how people work, live, and shop, which require fewer physical spaces and failing tenant demand. There's also been a sudden surge in interest rates, which caused property values, especially commercial property values, to fall. Now, the actual mechanisms and conditions of acquiring a commercial real estate loan significantly differ from traditional real estate loans and may harm this sector's nimbleness. Commercial real estate loans are often conditioned on shareholder approval to raise or lower rents, which can lead to indefinite vacancies. The U.S. office vacancy rate reached a milestone in the first quarter when it rose to 12.9%, exceeding the peak vacancy rate during the 2008 financial crisis. Now, even if you have no skin, as they say, in the commercial real estate game, it's worth keeping an eye on only because there are trillions of dollars tied up in it. Don't think that you are safe because you don't own commercial real estate. Your bank or your employer might be heavily leveraged in this failing market. And that can mean that as a sufferer, they will seek to push those losses onto you through higher interest rates on borrowing, stricter loan conditions, removing bonuses, suspending pay raises, or even downsizing. None of those build consumer confidence in the economy, further slowing spending and reversing growth. And while this may be an anecdotal observation on my part, a good friend of mine works in the commercial loan industry, and he recently informed me that it's getting uglier by the day. They're canceling multiple loans and making it very difficult for businesses to get loans on these properties. So we may be near a tipping point. However, not all commercial real estate markets are about to suffer. Large warehouses and data centers benefit from remote workers and consumers. Commercial real estate in the form of apartments is also strong as rents remain high and a housing shortage persists. Still, many big banks and investment firms have trillions of dollars tied up on their balance sheets with overpriced high-rent properties with significantly decreasing demand. And when all that comes to the surface, it's not going to look good for the balance sheets of banks already struggling to keep their heads above water. Now, two of the largest owners of commercial real estate, Blackstone and the Brookfield Corporation, they're all straining under the pressure of this massive downward pressure. Blackstone reported the profits from the sale of assets fell $4.4 billion over the last quarter, down 54% from the $9.5 billion it cashed in during the first quarter of last year. Now, Brookfield Corporation has defaulted on nearly $1 billion worth of commercial real estate debt just this year. Morgan Stanley has warned that commercial property prices could suffer from a crash as deep as the 2008 crisis and could see commercial property prices eventually plummet 40% or more from their peaks. UBS employed a less dire tone, arguing that commercial real estate headlines are worse in reality. And I don't presume to know as much about the financial markets as these banking giants do, but UBS also cites the health of the overall banking system as a sign this crisis wouldn't get too bad, and the losses can be absorbed. If last month taught us anything, it's that the banking system is more fragile than we thought and may not be as healthy as many think. Whatever occurs in the commercial real estate market the rest of this year, we will have some glimmer of how bad this will get for the economy when over $1 trillion worth of mortgage loans mature next year. If we're still amidst a global recession, that can be a death knell. If we are in a recovery phase by then, we may be able to absorb that collectively. What do you think? Is a bursting of the commercial real estate bubble the next shove to push the economy over the edge? Let us know your take on this in the comment section below. Russia, Ukraine. Ukraine may be ramping up its counteroffensive, and Russia is taking up defensive positions. Ukraine has conducted several shaping operations, small probing attacks meant to confuse the Russians and obfuscate Ukraine's actual point of attack. Now, Ukraine has asked for media silence to further the Russian anxiousness of an inevitable attack. And last night, surface drones again attacked the Russian fleet near Sevastopol, deep in Crimea. Now, the strategy of these smaller efforts is to overwhelm Russian military leadership and confuse and deceive the Russian forces. At least one of these small penetrations of the Russian front line may have been Ukrainian forces crossing the Dnieper River and entering the occupied left bank of the Kherson River. If this incursion that Russian bloggers are reporting is accurate, Ukraine may be engaged in sabotage efforts or small assault far behind the front lines. It's not likely to be the spear point of a counteroffensive, however, because of the difficulty ferrying the river since Russia has blown the main bridges. Now, the Russian-installed head of Ukraine's southern Kherson region denied the reports that Ukrainian forces had taken up positions on the Dnieper River's eastern bank. If Russia pulls its forces from Bakhmut to support other areas, Ukraine could gain a psychological win in the eyes of the world and the Russian forces by regaining full control of the city. At best, it's just a psychological win only in the city, which has been reduced to rubble after 8 months of a bloody standoff, shelling, and fighting. Before the war, it was a mining city with a population of 70,000, and the current population is estimated to be under 3,000 today. Bakhmut really lacks overall strategic and operational importance, but it may be Putin's hubris as Russia has obliged Ukraine by throwing more and more warm bodies into what the Wagner Group has called a meat grinder. Meanwhile, Ukrainian forces continue to strike far behind Russian-controlled lines. Most recently, occupation authorities have blamed a Ukrainian drone for a fire depot in Rovinky in the Luhansk region. Rovinky is 100 kilometers from the front lines in Ukraine and just 30 kilometers from Ukraine's border with Russia. Now, the Deputy Foreign Minister of Ukraine said that for the war to end in 2023, Ukraine has to receive 10 times more military aid than it has received from its partners over the past year. And one division of Patriot anti-aircraft missile systems has been deployed to Ukraine, and more are coming. There is record global spending on the military worldwide, spurned by the Ukrainian war. European spending on the war shot up 13%, and U.S. spending accounted for 2.4% of the total U.S. military spending in 2022. Now, Russia's military spending has grown by an estimated 9.2%. And it is estimated that the world's spending has reached an all-time high of $2.24 trillion. The invasion of Ukraine revealed that the U.S. stockpile of 155mm shells and those of European allies were unprepared to support a major and ongoing conventional land war, sending them to scramble to bolster production. Now, the dwindling supply has alarmed U.S. military planners. The Army plans to spend billions on munition plants nationwide in its most significant transformation in 40 years. And this is partially to supply Ukraine throughout a prolonged battle, but it's also viewed as a means to dissuade China from its confrontation in the South China Sea. Now, the U.S. Army is spending about $1.5 billion to ramp up production of 155mm rounds from 14,000 a month before Russia invaded Ukraine to over 85,000 a month by 2028. In mid-May, Ukrainian forces, about 250 of them, are going to be trained in Germany on the Abrams tank and will be supplied with these refurbished tanks in Ukraine by mid-August. The training will take at least 10 weeks, so this tank isn't going to be a game changer on the battlefield until at least August. And while a counteroffensive will occur, there's still a lot of uncertainty about when. Russia seems to think it's any day now. They have begun forcibly evacuating civilians in Kherson, and it appears that, except for Bakhmut, Russian forces have moved to defensive positions throughout Ukraine. The Russia-Ukraine conflict is going to continue to put a strain on troubled economies throughout the world. So, are we on the cusp of a Ukrainian counteroffensive? Is the Ukrainian offensive underway, forcing Russia to reveal its cards as to where it is digging in and where it can be attacked with success? What do you think? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section below. Giveaway. For this week's giveaway, we're going to give away a hard case first aid kit. To be eligible for a chance to win in this giveaway, just simply post a comment below and click the like button. And for the next video later this week, I'll use a tool to draw the winner from the comments on this video randomly. And for this last week's winner of the potassium iodide tablets, the winner is the subscriber, The Crazy Mexican. I'll reach out to you shortly to get that sent to you. China. China continues to struggle to play both sides of the fence. They try to make the world happy by portraying themselves as peace brokers, yet they pander to Russia. Most recently, China's ambassador to France said in an interview that the former Soviet countries do not have an effective status in international law because there is no international agreement that gives substance to their status as a sovereign country. This drew sharp criticism from Lithuania's Minister of Foreign Affairs, who tweeted, "If anyone is still wondering why the Baltic states don't trust China to broker peace in Ukraine, here's a Chinese ambassador arguing that Crimea is Russian and other countries' borders have no legal basis." Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, they all said they would summon their respective Chinese ambassadors to seek clarification on the controversial comment. Beijing appeared to be scrambling on Monday to contain the fallout from comments by its top diplomat in Paris. The government in Beijing seemed to downplay the top diplomat's remarks, emphasizing China's preferred role as an honest broker in the war and any Russian-European strife. Now later, the Chinese embassy in Paris released a statement that the comments were not expressing official policy, but rather the ambassador's personal views that should not be overinterpreted. Now, the Chinese embassy has posted the entire transcript of the diplomat's exchange on the WeChat account, but they have since deleted all the records of it. China's ability to pretend to be neutral in the conflict may have run its course. In other areas, the largest ever annual military exercises between the United States and the Philippines, which this year for the first time included a focus on the defense of the northern Philippines and preparations for conflict if China moves to take Taiwan through force, are underway right now. Bosco Island, where the drills are being performed, is just 100 miles south of Taiwan and has a strategic Philippine position for defending the strategic Bashi Channel. Now, the channel, about 70 miles wide and bordered by the southern tip of Taiwan and the cluster of islands that include Bosco, provides the Chinese Navy with access to the east coast of Taiwan in the Pacific, including for submarines from their main base at the southern island of Hainan. Now, Australia is determined to be another strong power in this increasingly hotly contested area. Most recently, Australia has said the acquisition of nuclear-powered submarines, long-range strike capabilities, and its northern bases will be among the country's 6 priority areas after a major review of the defense strategy found the armed forces were not fully fit for purpose. Recognizing the increasing multipolar control in the area, Australia has partnered with the United States even while they seek to repair damaged relations with Beijing. Now, Australia's Deputy Prime Minister and Defense Minister has said Australia will continue to cooperate with China where we can, disagree where we must, manage our differences wisely, and above all else, engage and vigorously pursue our own national interests. What do you think? Are we closer to a conflict in this region, or is this just another day in the South China Sea? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section below. From the debate over the debt ceiling to the commercial real estate bubble collapsing to a Ukrainian counteroffensive and arms flowing into the country to China's continued pressure on the world stage, there can be no doubt that some of these conflicts are being continuously packed tighter and tighter with dry powder. It's simply a matter of time before a spark occurs somewhere, which could lead to all these seemingly separate events igniting all at once. And I always encourage folks to stay ahead of these things by prepping what they can now. When wars start or intensify, trade deals are called into question, or economies suffer through significant troughs, our daily lives are impacted, even if we are thousands of miles from the conflict zone. The way to insulate yourself from these global troubles is to prep locally. Prepping removes you from being just part of the equation. Your increased self-sufficiency and ability to endure the most troubling times will be a game changer. So I hope you prep today for the troubles these signs point to in the future. As always, stay safe out there.